Populism is on the rise in the United Kingdom. Is it enough to steer the UK towards a better direction, or is it only going to steer it more into chaos? Yeah, let's talk about that.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show.
Well, hey there, folks. Welcome to today's episode of The Brian Nichols Show. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios here in sunny Eastern Indiana. The Brian Nichols Show is powered by the best heart health supplement in the world, Cardio Miracle. So if you're looking to lower your resting heart rate, lower your blood pressure, or improve your pump at the gym, stick around. We'll talk about that later in today's episode. Or you can go ahead and scan that little QR code over my shoulder or head to cardiomiracle.com/TBNS. But first, let's dig into all things UK politics, but an overarching theme for today's episode, and that is the rise of populism. We've seen it here in the United States. Populism has absolutely been on the rise, both on the right and the left, and the same is happening over in the United Kingdom. So let's talk all things UK politics, specifically how populism will impact the UK elections, and is populism a tool to help fix the chaos that's currently unfolding in the UK, or is it only going to exacerbate the problem? Joining us here in the Brian Nichols Show today is Ted Newson. Ted, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Good morning, Brian. Thank you for having me. I'm very good, thank you.
Great to have you. And I'm guessing by the first sentence of the show, people are already guessing that you might have a vested interest in today's topic of conversation, Ted, because it sounds like maybe you have an accent. So talk to us a little bit about who you are, Ted, where you're from, and why, yes, you are so invested in UK politics.
Yeah, well, as you guys may have noticed with the accent, I am British. Obviously, this article is all about British politics and the rise of populism in my country, but it's got parallels in the US with the Trump stuff, with the Mamdani stuff in New York. And as to my background, I'm a politics graduate. I'm a political commentator with Young Voices at the moment, and I can't wait to get started today. Very excited. Thank you, Brian.
Very much. I'm looking forward to this. Let's first start out just kind of setting the stage here, because actually you guys have one tiny, I would say, political advantage relative to America. And that is you're not stuck with a two-party system, really. You do have a parliamentary system where lots of different political parties have voices. So unlike in America, where it's dominated by the left wing, right wing, you guys actually have a couple different choices that are leading right now the political conversation. Talk to us about those different parties. I know there's Labour, there's the Tories, and I believe it's the Green Party. Keep me honest here, Ted. Talk to us a little bit more about their different perspectives and how this all plays into the overarching populist discussion around the upcoming here prime minister elections.
Mm-hmm. So for the last 100 years or so, we have seen a two-party system very similar to the US, but probably over the last 10, 15 years, that has totally gone away. We've seen the rise of the Green Party, who are now polling about 15%. We've seen the rise of this new right-wing populist party called Reform UK, led by one Nigel Farage. I believe they're polling around 30% now. And it's the legacy parties that are wilting away. And we're seeing this new growth in alternative parties driven by populism.
Well, and populism, as I mentioned in my intro, it's been on the rise here in America over the past few years, especially. We've watched the rise of Donald Trump, and we've seen that on the left-hand side of the political aisle as well. You have folks like your Bernie Sanders or your Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes, or in New York City, Zoran Mamdani, who is now leading to be the next mayor of New York City as borderline communist. I'm just going to say it. So we see it right on both sides of the political aisle, though. There is this sentiment of populism. I've argued there is a use for populism, especially in a democratic system. You need to mobilize the masses. And what better way to do that than to tap into some popular sentiment? And then the main thing I always focus, though, is not just kind of floating in the wind, but rather having your populist roots based in something, and hopefully it's something of principles. And that's why I've been trying to urge libertarians to tap into some more of a populist sentiment here in the States, because I think much like what Thomas Massie is doing to actually get a lot of grassroots support, it's through this more populist message that's rooted in foundational principles, in this case, libertarianism. So going back to the UK politics, Ted, you mentioned, those three leading folks that are really, they're rooted in something, right? Nigel Farage, he's much more of a nationalist perspective. So you see that, he's got his values, Jeremy Corbyn, who much more on the left side of the political aisle, much more in the labor side of the argument, right? But then there's this guy, keep me honest here. His name is Burnham.
Andy
Burnham. There we go. So talk to us about him, because it sounds like he might be the bad type of populist, where he's not really rooted in foundational principles, but he just kind of does his own thing based on whatever is the vibe of the day.
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, we've seen previously populism. It's not necessarily a bad thing. If populism is underpinned by an ideology, it can be used to do a lot of good. The kind of national conservative populism of Donald Trump has turned out reasonably well for America. And we've got similar styles in Britain for different kinds of politics. So on the far left side, we've got Jeremy Corbyn, who is a populist for socialism. He pursues a kind of Zoran Mandami kind of leftism. We've got Zach Polanski, the new leader of the British Green Party. He pursues a kind of eco-populism where the climate crisis takes the forefront for his politics and his policies. And now leading the pack, we've got Nigel Farage, as I mentioned earlier, who is kind of pursuing a nationalist, populist and conservative agenda, which is ringing very well with the public. Now, Andy Burnham, he breaks the mold in this because he is no conventional populist. He joined politics in, I believe it's 1997. He joined at the dawn of the Tony Blair government for Labour. And so first of all, he was a Blairite. For people that don't know, Tony Blair, he espoused the third way, which isn't socialism, it's not conservatism, it's somewhere in between. So you've got a little bit of state support and you've got a little bit of free market capitalism as well. In my opinion, it's the worst of both worlds, but that's just me. So he started off as that. And then as politics shifted and the electorate went more to the left in terms of what they expected from the British Labour Party, we saw politicians such as Ed Miliband, who is more on the socialist tilt of the left, and then Jeremy Corbyn, who I mentioned earlier. He stayed the same his entire life, and he's always been a populist socialist. Now, Andy Burnham was a minister in all three of these people's governments and went on the record as saying, I support this, I believe in this, this is how I believe Britain should be run. Now, either he's a massive hypocrite, which could possibly be true, or he's got an inconsistent ideology. And I think with Britain's debt as it is today, we cannot afford to have someone like Andy Burnham getting himself into power on the back of false promises and wrecking our economy all the more.
So
I mean, we're already heading towards an IMF crisis. So to have someone promising nationalisation, promising everything to the British public apart from tax increases and spending cuts is very dangerous. So we're headed for something really bad should he get power.
Now, I was going to say, I said my my kind of teaser here to the electoral system in the UK. You guys maybe have a little bit of a leg up, and it maybe isn't in terms of outcomes. I was thinking maybe more so in terms of just getting more voices to the table, because to your point, and this goes more to the outcome side of things, is that as you do start to throw more more cooks into the kitchen, to use that expression, right? All of a sudden you start to pull away from those different voting blocks where you could have a stronger plurality, and you open the door to having a better candidate, an objective better candidate, lose to someone who is just kind of going along to get that popular sentiment. And then the question always becomes, well, if that person wins, like an Andy Burnham here, well, what do they actually govern like? What do they believe? Like, do we even know who they are? Or are they just going to bend the knee to whatever prevailing sentiment of the day is? And that's the overarching issue I think we have to really focus on. And candidly, to my Trump fans here in America, that's the same thing I've been preaching very strongly against here on the Trump side of the camp, because if you're just going with the movement because it's the movement, well, what's the limiting principle? What are we building this actually on? Or is it just, again, what I said earlier, is it just built on vibes? And we're seeing this with it's Donald Trump versus Congressman Thomas Massie right now. That is the main feud that we're seeing here in America, where Congressman Massie is someone who is a fiscal conservative, libertarian in ethos. He believes in individuality, property rights, the ideas of don't hurt people, don't take their stuff, right? Let limit government coercion. And Trump doesn't like him. He doesn't like Thomas Massie, Rand Paul, that libertarian ethos. And you can see, even though Trump went to the Libertarian National Convention back in 2024 and basically asked for the libertarian support, at his core, Donald Trump isn't ethically or morally or principally a libertarian. And I think it's just important for folks to understand across the board that right now, Trump really is, he stands for Trump, right? And that's not a condemnation. That's not a promotion. That is just what is an objective analysis. Trump is whatever Trump believes at that any given moment. And I think it's concerning, because if you're not, again, rooted in something firm in terms of foundation, in terms of values, then what do you stand for? Like, what do you actually believe? And how do you have something to look to in times of uncertainty to point you towards the right direction? Like, what are those first principles? And that's something that I think does get missed in the populist ethos, Ted. So I say all that, looking at the United Kingdom, I mean, of the real 4 choices that are out there right now in the electorate, what's the vibe? Like, where do you feel that people, by and large, in the electorate are leaning? Are they leaning towards one ideology over the other? Is it a kind of a split down the middle? And if so, or I guess not down the middle, but down all 4s, I guess. But even so, do you find that there are people who are still rooted in something of principle, even if it's something we objectively disagree with, but something that's real versus just whatever way the wind blows? Are too many people just completely out to lunch and not paying attention? You're trying to stay sharp, whether it's for work, learning, or just not forgetting where you left your keys. Been there. But lately, the mental fog hits hard. And brain fog isn't just stress. It's often tied to poor blood flow and low nitric oxide levels, because your brain needs oxygen just as much as your other muscles do. Because without it, you're slower to process, less focused, and more fatigued. And that's one of the many reasons why I trust Cardio Miracle. Not only does it boost nitric oxide for heart and circulation, it supports cognitive clarity, focus, and even mood regulation thanks to its unique blend of L-arginine, CoQ10, vitamin D3, and antioxidant-rich superfoods. So if you're tired of feeling mentally cloudy, give your brain what it's craving. Click the link in the show notes, scan that little QR code over my shoulder, or head to cardiomiracle.com/TBNS, which will give you 15% off your order. Just look for the little note on the website saying you're shopping with Brian Nichols. One more time, that's cardiomiracle.com/TBNS. And now, let's get back to the show.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to the credit of the US two-party system, it's not perfect, but it allows the parties to be reasonably broad church, which is what we've previously seen in Britain. You could be either conservative and economically liberal and socially conservative. That way you'd vote right wing, or you could be socially liberal and economically conservative with a belief in big state structures, and you'd vote for the left party, which is fair enough. I mean, at the moment, what we're seeing in Britain with, like you say, these 4 different parties, we're seeing a kind of factionalism. If I was going to relate it to anything in the US, I'd say SEC football, something I've been following recently, where people are fiercely loyal to their own tribe. And
how does it compare to your soccer or your football?
I mean, I love it. I've only just got into it, but I really love the spirit. It's fantastic. But like I was saying, it's this kind of factionalism, not giving any other side any credit whatsoever, even though in the case of the Conservative Party and the Reform Party, they're very, very close on things such as social conservative issues. Now, I'd say they differ on the fiscal issues. Reform tend to be a bit more MAGA in terms of big state spending to get things done. I don't think using the power of the state to solve problems is necessarily a bad thing, but it's when exceptional measures persist and we see people's liberties being taken away in the name of things such as counter-terrorism, which is when we get problems. And so on this, I think, for example, the new Jeremy Corbyn party and the Green Party, they're so close on stuff like wealth taxes, stuff like taxing the rich to fund the poor, stuff like massive state structures to make sure no one slips below a certain standard of living. But simply because they're different parties, the ones in the Corbyn camp are totally zeroed in on this socialist project, and the ones in the Green camp are totally into this kind of cult of Greta Thunberg. So they can't see the values that they share and instead are more divided.
Does Greta still do stuff with the climate change? I thought she was on to the whole Israel-Palestine thing.
I don't know. I mean, I find her quite irritating. People still treat her like a child. I think she's about 23 now. So
I know you can't pick on her because she's a kid. It's like, no, she's in her 20s. I'm pretty sure she's an adult by all standards. But Ted, really quick, I mean, just going back to the kind of the people in the United Kingdom, like, what's the vibe though, just of the people? I know it's one thing to look at the political parties, but I mean, we in America, we're seeing things where you're having police officers knock on people's doors because of political opinions, right? Like that, or not even political opinions, just having an opinion that doesn't jive with whatever the current vibe is of the day. So why is that happening? I guess first, but second, I mean, back to the overarching sentiment of the people there. What's the vibe in the United Kingdom? Like, are people just checked out? Are they aware that their liberties are being stripped away and their culture is being upended, like left and right? Like, is that something that people are actually paying attention to?
For sure. I think people are very discouraged with the state Britain is going in. The government is borrowing more than ever. Systems don't work in terms of public services. Taxes are the highest they've been in 100 years, nearly. And so I think people are so demoralized, they've almost picked the wrong kind of option, because rather than banding together to kind of demand the right kind of policies, and I'm a strong believer that people like personal liberty, people like their taxes low, and rather than band together to establish things like that, they've gone factional instead. So the people who think immigration is the biggest issue in Britain now support reform. The people who think maybe taxes are too high tend to support the Conservative Party. This is coming from my experience of, I come from the Reform Leaders constituency, so I have quite a few family friends who are reform inclined, and their main issue is immigration. I went to the Conservative Party conference maybe a few weeks ago, and everyone was talking about being sensible with our finances, like the Conservatives weren't last time. And then when it comes to, I don't want to keep banging on about this, but the socialists and the Greens, it is just because one side believes that socialism is the biggest issue in the country, and another believe that the climate crisis is the biggest issue in the country.
So basically, if I'm hearing you right, the Conservative and the Reform parties could just merge together, right? And then likewise with the progressives, the Labor and the Green Party, they could basically form together, and you would have essentially the equivalent of our Republican and Democratic parties here in America. I mean, is that fair?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, a lot of the shared socialist big government principles are shared on the left between the Greens and the Corbyn party. On the right, I think intrinsically reform is Conservative first principles. There's a little bit of complication when it comes to kind of spending on that, especially unfunded pie in the sky policies, which they have been accused of in the past. But more or less, I do think that those two camps could merge together. And in the middle, we haven't talked about this, but the Liberal Democrats, who, as far as I'm concerned, they don't represent either liberalism or democracy, but they are the centrist party. So if anyone believes that maybe the leftists are too out of line on high taxes and the right aren't compassionate enough on social issues, there's a party for them as well. So I really don't think you'd get that much value lost with a kind of partnership between the two sides.
Interesting. So, and this is an interesting thought experiment to have here on the show together right now, because this is almost an opportunity for us to really compare and contrast American politics with the UK politics. Like in America, we feel that we don't have as many voices at the table as we should. But if I were to hear you correctly, Ted, and I don't want to missay anything, but just keep me honest here, it feels like almost having so many choices has put the country in this sales world. We would call this paralysis by analysis, right? Where you have so many different things to consider that you're always focused on the what versus the outcome, right? So like it's the principles, it's the values, it's the T's and C's, all that kind of stuff.
The method, for sure.
Exactly. So I guess, I'm trying to make the corollary here between that mentality and when you have a voter in the UK, for example, you can find your I call it the bed bug issue. Like if you had bed bugs at home, like that becomes your top priority, is to get the bed bugs out, right? So like, what's the bed bug issue? Oh, I have a party that's representing specifically my bed bug issue, the Reform Party. They're specifically talking about immigration. Okay, I'm going to be a reformist, right? Whereas in America, you end up you basically only have really two options: red team, blue team, Republican, Democrat, and the Republican Party has made immigration one of their top issues, right? Like top 5 issues. So you're more, if immigration's your bedbug issue in America, you would vote for the Republican Party, right? So then I guess that the question comes to like, okay, well, if I'm in the United Kingdom and I have a chance to get I have a 25% chance. I'm just using that I know it's not accurate in terms of actual breakdowns, but I have a 25% chance of getting my one bedbug issue top priority and actually like get policy behind it to make a change, versus in America, even though we have less choices altogether, I now have a 50% chance to get my bedbug issue discussed and brought up to the top of the priority list and ultimately have policy behind it, which we are seeing right now in America. People, whether you like it or you don't, right? Like deportations are happening. So do you kind of hear what I'm saying? Like you might have less choices, but you have a better chance to get your priorities actually talked about and discussed and put into policy in a system like America versus a system like the UK, where you have more options. You can really hyper focus on those core issues, get the best person available to be the messenger, but you're still one of 4 options. So you might not actually end up being the final choice from the voters.
Yes, of course. And this kind of thing has happened all over Europe. In my country, Britain, we saw the Labour Party get over 400 seats out of a possible 650 in the constituencies of Britain. And I believe they only got something like 32% of the vote, which shows how split the country is. And it's not helpful. It's not helpful to neither the voter or the government to have these fringe parties campaigning on almost a single issue, because if they don't end up in power, these people aren't represented, which is why I'd support a kind of 2-party system like in the US. While you don't have maybe the whole party treating issues the same, there's almost a hierarchy of issues, and usually the economy comes out on top, as it should. But you've got a number of different senators who are broad church enough to espouse different views. Like you mentioned, you've got a lot of libertarians in the Republican Party, just as you've got MAGA Republicans who believe in massive great extensions of spending.
Yep.
And while that's not perfect, I think having those voices within the established systems is a much better approach than saying, no, I don't agree with this one issue, let me go set up my own party, because all you're going to do is take away from the party that you believe 90% of the stuff they talk about to quibble over the 10% that maybe you don't. And on a broader point, I think if you want more voices, be that in Europe or the US, to shift the Overton window towards your point of view. I think we need more political commentators. I mean, I don't know many people who go on podcasts, write articles for outlets, and kind of talk about their views to kind of push the culture in their direction. And it's becoming increasingly popular that people just set up their own political party to raise awareness for this one issue that maybe parties aren't talking about. And that's not right. It happens too much in Europe.
It's just funny, like, to hear someone say we don't have enough political commentators, and maybe it's because I am I hate to even say this, I am a political commentator at this point. I've been doing this since 2018, and we have well over 1,000 episodes, so I guess I do have a voice. But like, I don't really think of myself in that regards. But you're right. I mean, and this is why we're seeing here in America, especially going back to the populist sentiment here, Ted. Right, this is where a lot of the political commentary, at least in the American perspective, from the alternative media channels like podcasts, like YouTube channels, Rumble channels, whatever, where it's really gained traction, is because there's a customer base of people in the American electorate who are like, listen, I have values and perspectives and opinions that just are not being reflected in my media options. I turn on CBS, I turn on ABC, I turn on CNN, I turn on NBC, and I'm getting Republicans are trash, conservatives are trash, libertarians are trash. You didn't get the jab, you're trash. You don't believe the whatever 3-letter government bureaucracy is in their narrative of the day, you're trash. And just to hear that constantly, people are like, I'm looking for a different voice that's not calling me trash all the days of my life. And like, this is where you had voices on the right who started to leverage podcasts. They leveraged the YouTube channels, as I mentioned, to build up these alternative networks that ended up ultimately, I think, winning Donald Trump the electorate, or the election in 2024, because it gave him access to the electorate, right? Where people now have a voice by being like, they're in an audience now of somebody who's actually speaking what they believe. And this is, going back to the idea that you raised up of like having more political voices. I think you're right, because we need to be able to like foster like ideas that challenge the status quo. And you mentioned your Liberal Democracy Party in the UK, which is neither liberal nor democratic, right? We see that a lot here in the Democratic Party, where, I mean, Kamala Harris was basically appointed as the successor to Joe Biden after they pulled him off the ballot, with not one single vote cast by a Democratic primary. And yet they have Democratic in the name of their party. And that's just something I think a lot of people saw, and they said, this is silly. Like, we're seeing that you claim to stand for democracy, and you're more or less big hypocrites in not standing for that. So I say all that, like, going back to the populist ethos, where do we go, Ted, from here? Like, I know in America, we're seeing the change, I think, much more in a nationalist, conservative, in ethic type of reversion, almost in a national perspective, where that populist wave is going. I think it might crest soon, where we're hitting kind of the peak of this change. I think maybe 2026, 2028 will really be when that, we kind of hit the high point. But I could be wrong. This might be a longer term thing, especially as you see the discrepancy between birthing rates on the left versus birthing rates on the right. I mean, culturally, the right, if things continue to go the way they're going, it will dominate more of the younger generations. So I think we're going to see a continuation of more of a conservative, nationalist vibe kind of America, which will still have battles with more the left, progressive, woke side of the political aisle, and that will continue. But where do you think the UK is going to be, Ted? I mean, do you think that the UK is going to lean one direction over the next? Do you think that the immigration issue, for example, that Nigel Farage has been talking about for 10 plus years, like now that you guys are starting to actually see the manifestation of some of those biggest concerns coming to light, right? Like, is that going to push the UK back towards more of a conservative ethic? Like, what are your thoughts there? If you're a small business owner and your phone contract is coming up for renewal, ask your provider if you can just go month to month. Watch what happens. They'll stammer, they'll delay, or straight up dodge the question. Why? Because they don't want to earn your business. They want to lock it up. And that's why I'm such a fan of level 365. They don't play the contract game. Everything's month to month. No tricks, no traps. If they're not delivering, you can walk. But here's the kicker. You won't want to. Phones that actually serve you, not hold you hostage. That's level 365.
Okay, well, the first thing I'll pick up on that you mentioned previously was the US stuff. And this is why I think alternative media and independent commentators are so brilliant, because, I mean, I don't know if you'd agree, but 2024 was the podcast election.
Absolutely.
Donald Trump going on Joe Rogan was a massive moment.
It's why he won. Media. Yeah.
It's why he won, exactly. And so seeing that, we are seeing more kind of grassroots, either commentators or groups like Turning Point, like Young America's Foundation, and they are shifting the narrative. So whereas previously we may have seen conservatives who strongly believed in certain things, but didn't have anyone out there advocating for them and giving them a voice, they now have that. So we're seeing, and that's really to America's credit, we're seeing a Christian resurgence in the United States, and we're seeing people having more children, which I really, really want for Europe. I think you're going in a very good direction, at least with winning the culture war against wokeism and that kind of tearing down everything that built your nation. And I don't think Europe, and especially Britain, is there yet. At the moment, we're seeing kind of three cults. We're seeing this kind of cult of fiscal responsibility, the so-called sensibles saying the economy has always been the biggest issue. It remains the biggest issue. We need to get spending down. We need to get taxes down. We need to cut the state out of our lives. That's my camp. You get the people saying the boat's coming across the channel. We're getting 1,000 odd people coming every weekend. That is a national security issue. That is, some people call it an invasion in Britain. That's the propaganda line a lot of people take. And so they say that is the thing that needs to be focused on the most. And as well as that, you've got I guess you'd call it the cult of social responsibility, where people are bringing up all kinds of social issues, be that the environment and net zero, or be that people increasing poverty in Britain. My point personally, I think poverty is increasing because our taxes are through the roof, nothing works, there's a cost of living crisis. And in order to rectify that, we need to cut away the size of the state.
Yeah.
We need to start giving people back some personal autonomy. People need to take responsibility for the kind of position that they're in and kind of manifest their own destiny. And so, yeah, that's where Britain's at the moment. We're kind of split into three camps, and until we can kind of unite the right, like has happened under the MAGA movement, albeit begrudgingly by a lot of libertarians, we're not going to see a kind of resurgence in any kind of conservative values.
So that was your diagnosis. What's the prognosis? Where do you think you actually end up?
I don't know. I think we're going towards a Reform UK government in 2029. And while that doesn't necessarily scare me, I think there is a potential hazard for them to jump on the kind of MAGA Donald Trump train of spending their way out of every single issue, borrowing more and letting governments down the line actually pay for it, which ultimately we've seen with Trump's big beautiful bill. It had a lot of good things in it, but it's an extra $1 trillion or so of borrowing, which is not what the American economy needs. Now you've got American exceptionalism on your side, but with Britain, if we were to borrow, say, a large percentage of our GDP for a single act, we would very quickly find ourselves in a state like we saw in the mid-70s, where we're going to the IMF for money because we've defaulted on all of our debts. We can't tender our debt interest. And through that, we're going to see people going out on strike. from the public sector. And this is exactly why I think we need to shift that Overton window towards a more economically liberal perspective, so that people can be responsible while also getting to the roots of the social issues within the country that are considerable.
Well, Ted, if you're ever looking for a how-to manual, we got this thing from 1776 called the Declaration of Independence. Just keep it in your back pocket, not trying to foment insurrection or anything, but just a heads up. Hey, it worked out pretty good for us over here. But I'm going to leave that there. Ted, we really appreciate you coming on the show today. So with that being said, do us a favor, bring us home. Final thoughts here for the audience. What would you like the audience to take away from today's conversation? And of course, where can folks go ahead and continue the conversation with you? You got social medias, you got a Substack, or everybody's promoting something nowadays. So what do you got on your end?
Okay, well, I'll sum up, shall I?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. So what we've discussed today, America's system doesn't quite work. It is pretty broad church. Not everyone's going to agree with the stuff that MAGA is doing in its entirety, but the fact you agree with most of it is better than having specific issue parties like we do in the UK, which has fragmented the vote and meant that almost democracy has been scaled back because people are earning massive majorities on a mere fraction of the vote. So on social media, you can find me on Twitter at Newson Ted. I do keep a Substack. I think if you look up Edward Newson, you should be able to find it. It's got a big Union Jack on the logo. And as well as that, I recently did an article for the Daily Wire on free speech in Britain. So look up Daily Wire, Ted Newson. You should find it right there. And I think you'll enjoy it.
Good stuff. Ted, I really...
Brian.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Ted. This has been a really, really fun conversation. And by the way, folks, apologies to my audience who was reaching out to me yesterday because, we didn't have a show air on Monday because I am currently playing solo dad. So with schedule right now, I couldn't get the show up, and Ted was awesome in rescheduling with me to accommodate some travel stuff. So, here we are on Tuesday. Thank you for sticking with us. And by the way, folks, if you enjoy usually catching the show live, yes, we do normally air our episodes on Monday, Thursdays, and Friday. This week's a little off, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. But normally, yes, if you head over to YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, Facebook, we live stream the episode, the video version of the show, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern. As for the podcast version of the show, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, wherever it is you consume your podcast content, you can go ahead and find the Brian Nichols Show. We usually air the show right afterwards. So go ahead, hit subscribe. And of course, we have over 1,000 episodes of the Brian Nichols Show. So we talk all things politics, culture, sales, health, wellness, all that and more. So if you want to go ahead and check out some of those past conversations, briannicholsshow.com. As for yours truly, find me on X, Instagram, and Facebook at B Nichols Liberty. And one final plug, if you enjoy the show, if you enjoy the phenomenal conversations we have on the show with guests like Ted, do me a favor, support the show by supporting our sponsors. You can go ahead, for example, Cardio Miracle, scan that little QR code here over my shoulder, or head to cardiomiracle.com/TBNS, or hey, Cardio Miracle's not for you. No worries. We have dozens of other sponsors over at briannicholsshow.com/sponsors. Go ahead, check them out, support them if you have any interests there, like Blood of Tyrants Wine, Liquid Freedom Energy Tea, Ebles, CBD, and more. Or if you just want to support the show, you can make a one-time donation, again, over at briannicholsshow.com/support. With that being said, I think we're going to go ahead and put a pin in today's conversation. Ted, any final words for the audience before we go ahead and say goodbye today?
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, brilliant. Have a good day, Tate.
Awesome stuff. All right, folks. Well, Brian Nichols signing off here on The Brian Nichols Show for Ted Newson. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.